On Saturday, in the semi-finals, we have a repeat of the 2019 Rugby World Cup final between South Africa and England. Back on the 2nd of November 2019, the Springboks emerged victorious in an absolutely dominant performance over the English, winning by 32 points to 12 in what was an emphatic victory for South African rugby. They almost written off after losing to the All Blacks in the pool stages, but once again, they prevailed and were phenomenal in doing so. To this day, that is still one of the most painful defeats as an English supporter. I was over in Japan, I had every confidence in the boys that they could pull it off after what was an outstanding performance in the semi-finals against New Zealand. It wasn't to be though for England, and the South Africans dismantled England piece by piece, scrum by scrum and tackle by tackle with such a physical performance, especially at scrum time. They really did dominate England. England now have the opportunity for revenge in this semi-final, which would be a huge statement to the world of rugby, but unfortunately the odds are stacked against them. This isn't the England team of the 2019 Rugby World Cup and is far from it. This team doesn't have the same winning culture, some of the same personnel have changed, which ultimately leaves England in a difficult position. One could argue England don't have much pressure on them. The Springboks are huge favourites, which really could help England, with the Springboks coming off of a fantastic victory, beating the host France in what was a scintillating contest, with the Boks emerging victorious by a solitary point. It's a game which should be very entertaining to watch, should be very physical. Unfortunately, I don't think England can come through it. I'd love them to. It'd honestly be one of the best victories I've ever seen. But I think it's all in the Boks' favour going into this match, but we'll have to wait and see. Rassie Erasmus and Steve Borthwick have named their teams. The South African team remains relatively unchanged, with the English team bringing in a few different combinations and players. We'll start off with the front row, as always. For South Africa, we've got Kitsoff, Biambi and Malherbe. Such a powerful front row, probably the most powerful front row in the world of rugby. I wouldn't be surprised if the South Africans call a mark. If England kick deep, they opt for the scrum and probably try and milk a penalty out of it. Fair play to them, they are very confident in one another, and that is something in which I'm not looking forward to. England go with Marler, George and Cole. Joe Marler coming in to shore up the scrum. I think Steve Borthwick thinks Joe Marler's a better scrummager than Ellis Genge. I mean, Genge offers so much more around the pitch than Marler, but it's clearly a priority at scrum time from Steve Borthwick. Dan Cole on the tight head came on in the 2019 Rugby World Cup final very early on after Carl Sinclair got knocked out. So Dan Cole in that game really struggled at scrum time, so hopefully England can shore up. I'm sure that's the main thing that they're focusing on at training this week. And then at hooker, Biambi and George. The South African line-out's been very impressive all tournament. They lost a couple against France, they'll be looking to tighten that area up. And Jamie George, I think the line-out faltered a little bit against Fiji, but Jamie's definitely England's best hooker to throw the line-out darts as well. Into the second rows, a huge second row in Etzebeth and Mostert. Absolutely unreal, against Maratoji and George Martin coming in for Ollie Chessum, who's been relegated to the bench. George Martin coming in probably based upon power. He's slightly bigger than Chessum, will add a bit more of a punch in the carry and the tackle, and especially at scrum time, in which England are going to need every single kilogram they can find. South African front row is just huge and is such a world-class combination between Etzebeth and Mostert. They'll look to disrupt the English line out. Maratoji's going to have his hands full. I'm glad we have Courtney Laws in there as well, because we have to have three jumpers in this game, considering Khaleesi. I think all of the South African outside of the front row can jump. Maybe not Dwayne Vermeulen, but they're all phenomenal athletes. Moving into the back row, Khaleesi, Pieter-Steph du Toit and Dwayne Vermeulen. I think that's the same starting front row as the World Cup final, which is huge. Pieter-Steph du Toit had the best performance I think I've ever seen him have in that final. Was just utterly ridiculous. Took down England's space and was just phenomenal in the carry, and every single tackle he made, you could feel it from behind the screen. For England, they go with Courtney Laws, Tom Curry and Ben Earl. I mean, if you just look at the number 8 comparison, Vermeulen against Ben Earl, the size difference is just unbelievable. It's not a good sign for England by any means. They're going to have to be very careful in terms of attacking in a different way. You can't run straight down the throats of these South Africans, because they will literally turn you into biltong and eat you alive. Ben Earl's got to use his footwork, got to attack in a different way, offset the defenders via some footwork, because you will not want to run straight down their tracks. Moving into the back line, Ryanak starts for South Africa against Alex Mitchell of England. Mitchell's become England's starting choice after being left out of the initial World Cup squad, and Ryanak's come in for Faf de Klerk, only in the last couple games really. Ryanak is a quality operator. He played some unreal rugby when he was over in the Gallagher Premiership playing for Northampton Saints. Such a fast player for a scrum half. He's got so much speed in which you don't want to give him an intercept. He's so good at running those inside support lines, as well as a good box kick as well. At fly half, despite many concerns over Manny Leboc's kicking and the willingness to bring Andre Pollard in, he stays. He's definitely the more creative of the fly half, such a good attacking weapon himself. He's one of those fly halves that, if you drift off of him, he'll happily take the space. He's such an athletic player and very, very good. Owen Farrell at 10 for England. He's probably England's best Test match 10 if we compare him to George Ford or Marcus Smith. Maybe there's a shout for George Ford to start, but he's on the bench in this game. I think the physicality of Farrell at 10 is definitely something in which would have been looked at going into this game. George Ford is a player in which the South Africans, if he was playing, would want to run straight down his channel. They'll probably want to do the same to Farrell, but he's got a little bit more of a pack behind his punch in defence. Into the centres, talking about power, we've got Diolande against Manu Tuolangi. Absolute car crash. Diolande in a very good vein of form, scored against the French, was playing some brilliant stuff there. Tuolangi also had a standout performance, probably not on the same level as any of the South African performers against France, but against Fiji he was very, very good. Scored the opening try in the wide channel, and England do definitely rely on his power. Diolande partners Jesse Crew, who put in one of the best grubber kicks I've seen of the tournament. Just unreal stuff to be able to thread through such a nice kick at full pace for Cheslin Colby to run onto. And then Joe Marchant also scored for England against Fiji in the last game. Some really good footwork from him, and both of these centres are going to have their handful trying to defend against Diolande and Creel. In terms of the back three, at 11 you have Cheslin Colby, who was one of the main figures, and his profile grew massively upon the Rugby World Cup final win for South Africa against England in the 2019 final. Unreal stuff from him. Just such an incredible player, and scored the ever so famous try right at the end. He's against Elliot Daly, who was also in the 2019 Rugby World Cup final, but he finds himself on the left wing as opposed to fullback in this game. Daly's got a good left boot on him, which will be instrumental in terms of playing in the right areas, but he definitely doesn't have any of the same sort of attacking qualities as Cheslin Colby. I think Owen Farrell's going to have to take his kicks a little bit quicker off the kicking tee, knowing Cheslin Colby's going to be breathing right down his neck on every opportunity. Onto the right wing, you've got Arendse against May. This is just a no contest really. Arendse's playing some unbelievable stuff. Johnny May had a very good tournament back in 2019, but was left out of this England Rugby World Cup squad. But he finds his way onto that right wing. Johnny May's a player in which you know what you're going to get. He kick chases very well. He's decent under the high ball, but in terms of the explosive power and footwork and agility of Arendse, I don't think it comes close. At fullback, we've got Willemse against Freddie Stewart. This is probably one of the only matchups in this team which is relatively close. You'd still probably favour Willemse with his all-round game and kicking ability, but Freddie Stewart under the high ball is very, very solid, and that'll be a good contest. Hopefully we can see them go against each other under the high ball. But those are the starting 15s. I think it's going to be a very, very physical affair, and ultimately the South Africans physically will back themselves and feel very confident. In terms of the previous score, was at Twickenham, with South Africa winning 27 points to 13, obviously away from home. That was a brilliant performance from them that day, enduring a red card as well in the process of going along to win the match. So dominant performance from South Africa there, dominant performance in the final. England since the final have had, I think it was a win or two over South Africa, so maybe they can draw upon some experience there, but none of them were emphatic victories in the same way that South Africa dismantled England last time out. What do the bookies say? The bookies have South Africa to win by a margin of 13. That seems about right, if not a couple points more than that. The South Africans are looking very, very strong, and you just know they're going to turn up. On the big stages, they turn up, and I think this could be one of those occasions again. The fact that there's no pressure on England really could help them, might help lift their spirits, and you don't want to be expected to win ever really, because it means that there's so much expectation on you to play well. So hopefully they can let their hair down and play freely, and ultimately go out and just attack the South Africans from the very first minute. In terms of the benches, the South Africans name a bench of Fulry, Nish, Koch, R.G. Snyman, who's got to be one of the most scary looking figures in the whole of rugby. He's not a player I would want to tackle by any means. Could you imagine like England hanging out on their feet, say they're knackered at 65 minutes, South Africans go, oh, Eben Etzebeth, you've got to come off. England like, oh, thank goodness for that, Eben Etzebeth's off, and then they bring on, was it 6'6", 6'7", RG Snyman. It's not a good place to be. Also on the bench, Quagga Smith, and then Faf de Klerk, Pollard and Willie LaRue are the backs. So the Boks going for a 5-3 split. I wouldn't have been surprised if they went for an 8-0, but they've gone for a 5-3 split. They do what they want. That's pretty much what South African rugby and the coaches do. If they want to play with 3 backs on the bench, they will. If they want to play with 1 back on the bench, they do what they want. And they're very experimental, and I have to take my hat off to them for that. In terms of England, their bench consists of Theo Dan, Ellis Genge and Sinclair. Genge is going to be the player which must come on at least with 30 minutes to go. He must make a real impact, because that's ultimately why he's on the bench. If you ask Steve Borthwick who's the better player, Marler or Genge, well, he probably wouldn't give you an answer, but if he said it truthfully, it would be Ellis Genge, so he's got to be a real weapon off of the bench. And then Sinclair, then you've got Ollie Chessum, Billy V, Danny Kerr, George Ford and Ollie Lawrence on the bench. Danny Kerr looking to speed up the game, probably try and attack some tired bodies later on in the match, but the South African bench is looking very, very strong, and I'd love to see the pack weights going into this game, and also the reserve pack weights, because the impact of the South Africans on the bench is going to be huge. Me personally, what do I see happening? I think it will be reasonably cagey early 10-15 minutes. I think both teams will kick quite a lot, but then I ultimately see the South Africans getting the grip of the game and ultimately scoring a good few tries and plenty of kicks off of the kicking tee to secure the win. We're very interested to hear what you have to say. Who do you think comes away victorious? Ultimately, I'm going to be back in my side, England. I'll get right behind them. I really want them to win. I think can they win? Ultimately, it's Test match rugby. Of course they can win. Will they win? That's a whole different question. If I had to put my last pound on a side, it's definitely going towards the left-hand side of this whiteboard into South Africa. But who knows? Anything can happen at this level of rugby. But yeah, the odds are stacked against England. I'd love to know your thoughts in the comment section down below. Who's going to win? By what margin? If you put it in the comments, it locks it in. You can't change it, and we'll have to have a look at it when we review the match. But yeah, I hope you all enjoy the game, and yeah, thank you very much for watching.